Okay, let's start with just a bit of overview, and then we'll jump right into it. Believe it or not, LVM was intended to make life easier. In the past, 20 years ago or so, most systems began life with a single hard drive, and from that point on, it became the "but what happened when" game. For example, what happened when you configured your file system to only consume a certain portion of your hard disk, but over time your data consumption has begun to outpace your original calculations and you're running out of space for your data, all the while having plenty of free space on the drive. No, the data won't just spill over into the free space. Or what happened in the reverse situation where your configured file system is hoarding more room than what you'll ever need, and you wish that you could reclaim space and use it for something else. Yes, this happened, especially during the days of dual booting operating systems. Another pain in the neck happened when the decision was made to add another disk to the system. In order to access the drive, you'd have to format and set it up with its own file system. Even if the file system were the same as the original, it would always be recognized as a separate drive with its own file system. Most importantly, if you added the drive in order to relieve a drive that had exceeded its storage capacity, you could never access the old data and the new data contiguously. This was exceptionally problematic in scenarios where software needed to access old and new data as if it was on the same storage device. Almost universally, the answers to the above "but what happened when" questions involved backing up data to another location, formatting drives, replacement of drives, and many times, depending on how stupid things got, full-blown OS reinstalls. All of which are solutions that cost time, money, and heartburn to the poor administrator or engineer tasked with performing these jobs. The Windows community came up with their own solutions to these headaches, which I go over in another article. The Unix and Linux community embraced logical volume management, aka LVM. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. There are 5 components that make up the heart of LVM, 4 of which undergo a bit of a metamorphosis in order to obtain a final product of a logical volume. In my mind's eye, I see LVM as a construct of encapsulation. However, I've noticed the most prevalent depiction throughout the entire IT field is a layered model. I'll defer to the standard during this overview and represent it using this ideology. However, if your mind is like mine, and you find yourself looking at LVM as one component encasing another component, encasing yet another, and so on, then know that you are not alone. 1. System devices. This would be our hard drive. 2. Partitions. Hard drives are always, in one way or the other, partitioned. Partitions are logical dividers that separate portions of your hard drive. In my diagram, our drive with the name of dev SDA is partitioned into 3 segments. Those segments are dev SDA1, dev SDA2, and dev SDA3. To be clear, the end result is one drive, dev SDA, made up of 3 segments. 3. Physical volumes. LVM works by taking logical volumes and allocating them as directed. However, as you can see in the images, logical volumes don't exist on your hard drive by default. When we decide to create logical volumes to manage our disk space, we start by simply installing the Logical Volume Manager software. Once installed, we can start the process, which begins with instructing LVM to take one or more partitions from the hard drive and create what are called physical volumes. Physical volumes effectively let LVM know what resources it is allowed to use. LVM takes hard drive resources, the partitions, and creates physical volumes, which in turn become resources for LVM. 4. Volume groups. Now that LVM knows what resources it has to work with, it can begin its work. Our physical volumes are allocated to one or multiple volume groups. Volume groups. In my experience, there's nothing that pushes a room full of advanced sysads to violence quicker than a discussion on volume groups, understanding them, and their proper implementation. I'm going to try to keep this as basic as I can and hopefully not create some kind of nerd uproar. In my grand opinion, volume groups are simply another tool to allow you options and additional functionality in LVM. They allow you to separate the physical volumes and organize them as needed. More often than not, you're not going to use more than a single volume group. I've been at this a while, and the most I've ever seen is 3, and there were all kinds of crazy stuff going on with that system. That said, creating a volume group is a mandatory step in the LVM process. You'll take your physical volumes that you created and allocate them to one or several volume groups. Those volume groups, in turn, are now ready for the final step of the process. One final thought about volume groups as they pertain to physical volumes. Although you can have more than one physical volume in a volume group, you cannot have more than one volume group containing the same physical volumes. Let me put that more clearly. Volume groups cannot share physical volumes. If SDA1 is being used in volume group 1, then volume group 2 needs to find another physical volume to use. 5. Logical volumes. Finally, we get to logical volumes. Logical volumes are where all our file systems and data will be placed. They're the equivalent of standard file system partitions, except now they're cool, and you do cool things like shrink and grow them. The most noteworthy aspect of the actual logical volumes is that they are part of a volume group. Again, I frequently envision them as encapsulated within the volume group.